So this session is called The Place of Fiction. In an age of artificial intelligence, where many people rely on ChatGPT to write a message, to write a speech for their best friend's wedding, and even to write an obituary for someone who has passed, what do creativity and imagination, what is the place that they hold? In an age where there are so many changes, technological, political, social, economic, happening so rapidly around us, all at once, simultaneously, what role does fiction play in helping us make sense of all of it? Does fiction make us more empathetic? Does it make us better people? And what is the process that goes into writing stories? What is the motivation behind it, and what is the inspiration for it? These are some of the questions that we will be looking at today. So with me, we have Andaleeb Wajid and Keshava Guha. A round of applause for them. Thank you for being with us today. So let me start with something quite basic. Since both of you are fiction writers, when did you start writing fiction? Andaleeb, let's start with you. You're prolific, and maybe you could start with when your first novel came out.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the Hindu Lit Fest for inviting me, Hindu Lit for Life. Radhika, I've been writing fiction from, I was probably one of the first to, not I would say I was the first, but I did a lot of fan fiction writing when I was 10, 11, but this was really bad versions of Enid Blyton or, Asterix and all that. So I made my own versions, which I realize now is what fan fiction is all about. But fiction was something that came to me very easily. My family, a lot of storytellers in my family, my father, my maternal grandmother, they would always tell stories. My father especially would, make up stories on the go. So it became very, it just came to me very naturally to tell stories. And that was how it started, when I was very young. But my first novel took quite some time to get published. I'd been writing short stories in newspapers for children and short story anthologies and all that. But my first novel took quite some time it got published in 2009. And that's now, I think, 16 years ago. So it's been quite a journey.
Wow, and what about you, Keshava?
So if you leave out sort of stories that I wrote as a child, I think like many, I certainly used to be the case, many novelists were people who were frustrated poets. I'm certainly in that category. So when I was, say, 15, 16, 17, my biggest love as both a reader and as a writer was poetry. And I think even at that age, I could tell that I lacked talent in that direction. And now that you might think you lack talent, but you might also think that if you keep working at it, talent will eventually manifest. So that didn't happen, didn't manifest. And then I also had a piece of good fortune, which is that I think one thing that most writers don't know is where their ideas come from. Because fiction is part technique, part imagination, and the imagination is the connecting with the unconscious. And until I was at university, I never actually had ideas for novels. I was a big reader of novels. And the reason why ideas were important is that I always thought of my own life as being quite boring. I grew up in a very privileged little bubble in central Bangalore. I came from a relatively happy, very happy family, and I wasn't very interested in writing about if you're not interested in yourself, really no one else is going to be. So I had to have ideas that were external. And then when I was at sort of midway through university, I had this idea for a book, which eventually became my first book. And I didn't know where it came from. And then while I was working on that book, there was second idea, third idea, fourth idea. I don't get them every day, but once I had that stock of ideas, I started to actually give it a try, and whereas with poetry, I knew I didn't have talent. With fiction, I thought there was a chance. So I thought, okay, if I develop this, at least it might be worth seeing what happens. And then once you start doing it, I don't know if it's your experience, but the actual writing, so actually reading and actually writing, I can't imagine a more enjoyable way to spend a morning or spend a day, and it's very addictive. So once you're doing it, you want to do it, get better at it. You want everything else in your life needs to exist to allow you to do more of it. Then it becomes easier.
So that actually takes me to the next question about your process. So you said it becomes addictive, right? Andaleeb, we were just talking before the session, and she was telling me that she was writing today morning as well. And she's written 50 novels, which includes young adult fiction, memoirs. You've experimented with so many genres. So, I mean, can you talk to us a little bit about process? And I think my more specific question is, do you sleep?
I sleep, definitely. In fact, in my early days when I started writing, I was so excited, like what he said, it's addictive. I felt that so much that in the middle of the night, I would get up and write a scene because I was so sure that I wouldn't remember it in the morning. And this would be some twist which would make no sense in the morning, But now my sleep is very important. So now there is no way I write beyond 10 o'clock. I don't write anything. I write like a chapter or two a day. For me, it's part of, so that, when people ask me how I write so much, it's only because I treat it like a job. And I don't look at it as, I treat it very seriously like a job. And I'm like the nightmare of a boss for myself. So, but I enjoy it. I mean, I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't enjoy it. It's overall something that I ideally want to live in a world where I can get paid for writing my books. So, it's my whole journey from the past 15 years has been towards that, to be able to write my books and get paid for it.
So you're just incredibly disciplined. I mean,
disciplined. Writing is the only place in which I'm disciplined. Everything else is a mess.
And I'm sure that's the same case with you as well. I mean, not that everything else is a mess.
Look, I had to develop it. So things happen in your life. I mean, Andaleeb has had to write. You had written all your novels around also being a mother and having other duties. So when I wrote my first book, I was still, only a few months or years removed from being an undergraduate. And my life was more chaotic, and I would write at midnight or do things like that. But I've always been struck by this advice that Gabriel Garcia Marquez gave to young writers, which is when he was asked about, what happens when you have writer's block, and he said, I think of myself as a shopkeeper. You open the shop at a certain time, you close the shop at a certain time every day. Some days a lot of customers come in, some days no customers come in, some days no one might buy anything, but you still keep the shop open. And so the way I interpret that is, well, you sit at the desk and you have the blank page in front of you and you don't look at your phone. And that writer's block that you told yourself you might have might just be an excuse to not go in and sit at the desk. That said, I'm amazed by writing a chapter or two a day. I think a chapter or two is a good month for me. But look, I said I started off as trying to be a poet. And I do write very slowly because I am trying to get each sentence and each paragraph as right the first time. We all have this perfect sentence, perfect paragraph, perfect novel in our heads. We're trying to get as close as we can to that. And storytelling isn't necessarily a gift that I have. It's something that I have to work on. But I absolutely love language. I love the English language. My head is full of poems and bits of other writers, and I love the music of language, and it is a slow process. Therefore, getting each paragraph and each page to coincide as closely as possible with what I have in my head. But yes, I think discipline is absolutely invaluable, and if you I know there are writers who say that they don't have discipline, but over 20, 30, 40, 50 years, they don't tend to write very many books.
So do you get writer's block? Because if you're writing 2 chapters a day, I imagine that's something you've not heard of.
I don't really think of it as writer's block, I just decide this is not the day I'm going to write. And then I come back to it, and like he said, you open up your laptop and eventually the words flow. So I don't really think too much. If I'm stuck particularly in a scene, it's best to let it go and come back and attack it from a different angle. It usually helps.
And does reading help you write? I mean, so the question is twofold. One is, who are the writers that you looked up to as children? Because you both said that you heard a lot of stories and you read a lot. So who are the writers that you look up to? And do you still read a lot, and does that inspire you to write?
So, my relationship with reading has been such that, so a few years ago, you probably know my husband and mother-in-law passed away during the COVID thing. So while I was in the hospital, where I was going to get admitted in the hospital, for some reason, I didn't take anything with me except my Kindle. I don't know why in my mind I was thinking that this is a holiday and I'm going to be reading. So, and I reached the hospital, and that time my husband was still not admitted. So I sent him a message, oh my God, I've forgotten my toothbrush. Oh my God, I've forgotten the phone charger. So he said, what did you take and go? So I said, I've taken my Kindle. So, reading is that so tied with my life that I'm always constantly reading, if not reading, listening to an audiobook. So for me, it's really very important for me. And there are a lot of readers I go back to, so many. I'm a huge fan of crime fiction and mysteries and that sort of a thing. So I can't really offhand remember names. We were talking about it yesterday, but I grew up reading Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys and all that, stuff which every child of a certain age grew up reading. We weren't lucky enough to get access to books by Indian authors like the kids today have. So
she mentioned Nancy Drew, and I just want to say that I was telling her this last night as well, that I felt that her book reminded me of Nancy Drew, actually, because for those of you who have read Nancy Drew, every chapter will end in a cliffhanger, and some of Andaleeb's writing is also like that. And Keshava, what about you? What about your reading habits?
In terms of Indian authors, the ones that I loved best were Satyajit Ray's Feluda stories, which had been translated maybe in the 80s or 90s. I was lucky enough to just be there in time to read them. And I don't know how I haven't gone back and looked sort of how the translations are, but I certainly loved them at the time. And Amar Chitrakatha was a huge influence. But my favorite, by a country mile, were the William Brown books by Richard Crompton. And so, when I was, there's a, let me give you a bit of context. There's a kind of, every child of a certain class, that is, every child who grows up exposed to English in India, seems to grow up reading Enid Blyton. And I've got to admit, I've absolutely despised Enid Blyton my whole life. I read it. You didn't have a choice. You had to read it. And the reason I despised it was because to me, in the most boring, vanilla, sickly way, reproduced the boring, conformist values of middle-class adult society, which is, all about, basically what are parents telling you, what is school telling you? Listen to us, don't question, don't crack jokes, don't talk in class. And so William Brown had this, this anarchic, outsider, and he was the adult world dubbed him a bad student, but actually he's a very intelligent, very perceptive critic of what's going around him. Hypocrisy, class prejudice, what have you. And she's a brilliantly funny writer. Interestingly, when she tried to write for adults, she was desperate to become a writer for adults. She wrote the children's books to make money, and the adult books are wooden, and she's trying to be Jane Austen. They just don't work. But those books, my own sensibility, which is very much ironic, and humor plays a huge part in it. I really think it goes back to that, and always trying to look at the world through the eyes of through a kind of sardonic, questioning perspective. So that's I think, absolutely essential to me.
Yeah, I think many of us are fans of William, Robert, and Ethel. So, let me tell you a little bit about their most recent books, which will give you context to the next question. So for those of you who haven't read it, and for those of you who haven't read it, please do pick up the books, which will be available outside after this session for signing as well. Keshava Guha's latest book is called The Tiger's Share, and it's about two women in Delhi, Tara and Leela. Tara is a successful lawyer, and she has a brother who she's not very proud of because he's a lot less ambitious than her. And their father, Brahm Saxena, that's an interesting name, by the way, retires and decides not to bequeath his property to his children. And he announces this and also says that he's thinking about his place in the world. And he wonders what he's going to do next. The children don't know. He's become increasingly reclusive. So that's one family. And the other one is Leela's, who's Tara's friend. And Leela's father has just passed away, and her brother decides that he wants to be the head of the family. And there's a rift that's already there between them, and it only grows after the father's death. You know, this at the outset seems like a book about inheritance issues, but it is much more than that. So Keshava Guha weaves in issues of climate change, of class conflicts in Delhi, of gender relations, and much more. So my question to you is, do you see fiction playing a role in helping us understand real-world issues, like climate change, for instance, which is actually the center point of your book?
So I don't know about so wait. The answer is yes, but yes in a certain way, which is, I think it's, the novel has historically always played the role of helping. If it's a way for societies to understand themselves at a certain point in time. It's why I think I sometimes regret the extent to which so many very good novelists now set their books 20, 30, 40, 50 years in the past, because we're missing out on that, we're not exploring that potential of what the novel can do. What the novel can do is help us articulate or explore the changing mores of society at a given time. So our attitudes to class, to the environment, to each other. So not like, obviously, like, if you want a technical analysis of air pollution in Delhi, my book is not the place to turn to it. But in terms of how families are changing, how values are changing, how mores are changing, yes, I think that the novel is a very useful way to do that, because it also allows you to, within one book, to really give voice to various different perspectives on it. I mean, in my novel, for example, there's a character who, he's kind of an antagonist. You would say he's a bit of a villain, but he is genuinely a advocate of patriarchy. He's someone who positively advocates it, not as in a trendy way. He truly believes it, Kunal, whom you referred to. And that's one of the things fiction does allow you to do, is to give that person to try to get inside their head and pay attention to what they're saying. And it's very important, I think, that we not. So novels have to do it differently. You don't want a novel to sound like an academic treatise. The dramatic, the imaginative, the narrative elements are absolutely essential. But in the process of doing that, yes, there are. I wasn't trying to advance any particular view, but I was trying to look at what is going on in Delhi. Why has Delhi become like this? Why do we have one attitude to inheritance of property and a totally different attitude to the inheritance we bequeath when it comes to the environment? Yes, so that these are all definitely things that I value in fiction and that I was trying to do.
I actually found that fascinating, because I feel that a lot of conversations on climate change do tend to be academic these days and don't really speak to the lived realities of people. So it's quite interesting to have fiction woven around it, which kind of makes you understand the issue better. Andaleeb, in your case, so her latest book is Until We Meet Again, and it revolves around this character called Duha Rahman, who lives in Bangalore. Duha lives with her Ammi and her Abu, and they mean the world to her. And then suddenly her world comes crashing down when her Abu passes away. And Duha, before he passes away, has gone to a friend's engagement and has seen a really good-looking guy and can't stop dreaming about him. She's completely smitten. But then the second shock in her life comes when the guy comes knocking at her door and gives her information that threatens to tear her world apart even more. But what's interesting in your novel is that the father, who is dead, was not the patriarchal man that we see in Kunal's book. In your book, the woman Duha has a lot of agency, and I've not read all your novels, but I've read other reviews of your novels which also say that generally you give your Muslim characters a lot of agency. So do you think then that fiction plays a role in changing the way we understand Muslim women, especially in a country where many people tend to have pretty set notions of how they look and behave?
So I feel that books shouldn't depict reality as it is, but also as how it should be. So to contextualize this, last year I went to a literature festival, in a children's literature festival in a school. And these kids were not really, they hadn't read my books, but they had been given information that Andaleeb is coming. So they Googled me, I think, and some of them had made these questions which were on a bulletin board. So I walked up to one of these bulletin boards to see what the question was. The one in the middle staring out at me was, how do you motivate yourself to keep writing after being oppressed? Despite being oppressed. So I burst out laughing, but inside I was thinking, am I oppressed? I don't think so. I've never seen myself as being oppressed. Would an oppressed person travel all the way from Bangalore to this city in the other end of the country? And I was like, so some child in a good school Googled me, saw me, saw a photo of me in a hijab, which I thought was very stylish, by the way, with this, with my glasses perched on top of my head and all that, and I thought I was being very stylish. This child looked at me and said, oh my God, she's oppressed. So, we have a long way to go. So this is a very small start. So my books definitely showcase women as having agency, so that those who don't have agency in their lives, even now, when they read it, they might feel inspired to rise up against and do something. But that really kind of knocked me for the six, because I really did not think of myself that way. So it's kind of very humbling. 16 years since I've been writing, so many books. And for some Gen Z or Gen Alpha kid, I'm oppressed, so.
I think that's what I was referring to when I said some people have some very set notions, right? Or hijab, for them, immediately means oppression. But, I was also talking about the male character in your novel, and he's, as I said, not the patriarchal one. He wants Duha, who's his daughter, to have a very good life, and doesn't believe that she should get married immediately the way her mother wants her to get married. What's it like to write in detail about members of the opposite sex? So in your case, you're really sort of looking into the inner mind of this man. So how does that happen?
It's all imaginary.
A man who cheats on his wife.
Yeah, it's all imaginary. This is all being very optimistic and very hopeful that some man somewhere might be like this. None of the men I've come across are this sorted or this, Yeah, and of course, he's the man who's cheated on his wife, so he has his duality. But I've seen a lot of people who behave a certain way with family, behave a certain way with outsiders. So, but also for me, it was important to show how important his daughter was to him. Because there is this constant demonization of Muslim fathers where, in everywhere you go, and I mean, I'm not saying it's not there, but it's across the spectrum. It's not just Muslim fathers, So I wanted to write about a father who really loved his daughter. So, my father loved me madly, So he didn't live to see me become a writer, unfortunately. But I imagined my father, if he was there, this is how he would feel about me, and so it was just wishful thinking.
And Keshava, in your book, it's the other way around. So your protagonists are both women. Can I say typical Delhi elite women, very, very empowered, but also sort of live in their own bubble to an extent. And again, there are a lot of internal monologues as well. They speak to each other about their own anxieties, their insecurities, and their views of the world. So how did you write about that? And did you show did both of you show these novels, say, to friends and family to, get their opinion?
So I don't know. It's always tricky with friends and family because, with very few exceptions, and it takes a lot of time and effort to find the exceptions. It's not that they won't be honest with you. They can't be honest with themselves about their response to your work. And this is really, again, exceptions exist, of course. But as a general rule, if you want honesty, don't go to your family. If you want encouragement, by all means. But not if you really want that kind of, help with a constructive reaction. So the thing about writing as a man about female characters or in the voice of a woman is that if you screw up, you will get caught. Because the fiction business, throughout its history, has been a business that has been sustained by women. So initially it was women readers, then women novelists, percentage steadily, always women readers, by the way. Women have always been the core readership for fiction. As I said, they've kept the business alive. But today, whether it's in India, whether it's in Britain, whether it's in Korea, majority of the editors are women, majority of the agents are women, majority of the publicists are women, majority of the reviewers are women, at every level. As I said, majority of the readers have always been women. So, if you therefore, if you're writing as a man, you have an extra, not a duty of care, but if you got to try, or it's not going to end well for you. Now, I was lucky enough to have, most of my close friends are women, and then my mother, my wife, my sister, my aunt, my grandmothers, they're all people who have, in different ways, shaped the women in the book. They're not necessarily like them, but if you spend enough time listening and observing, you can learn. The last thing I'll say is, men and women are not monoliths. And so one of the things that I started exploring in the book, and it speaks to actually what Andaleeb was saying about the father and the daughter. In these two families, the younger women, so the daughters in both the families, they're really blinded by a kind of unseen, they're blinded by a kind of prejudice which doesn't allow them to properly see their mothers. They don't actually respect their mothers because their currency is professional success. And because their mothers stayed at home, they look up to their fathers, they see themselves in their fathers, they want to be the true inheritors of their father's legacy as successful professional men. And, so a daughter might see herself in her father, or choose to see herself in her father. Conversely, the narrator of my novel believes that it is mothers who are responsible for perpetuating patriarchy by bringing up sons wrong. So, yes, as I said, men and women are not monoliths. She may be a female narrator, but I may still have more in common with her. There are certain very important things I don't have in common with her, and those I have to try to learn about and understand. But there are other things that I do have in common with her, and it's always much more complex than, woman writing about men, man writing about women.
But I'm quite curious about what you said earlier. So why do you think it is that most reviewers and most people in the publishing world are women?
Yeah, so as I said, the readers have always been majority women. That's important to understand. Look, it's such a big, vexed question that after 2 centuries, I don't think I'm the person who has the keys to it. But I will just share a couple of sort of data points with all of you because, this is from the viewpoint of what the information that we have in the publishing business. The first is that it starts very early. So it's, again, very well established country after country that boys are willing to read books, are only really willing to read books by male authors with male protagonists. This is why J.K. Rowling's books were not published under the name Joanne Rowling, but under the name J.K. Rowling. It was precisely so that young boys would not know that a woman was the author of these books, and it had a male protagonist. Girls, on the other hand, again, exceptions exist, but on average, are willing to read books by male authors and female authors, male protagonists and female protagonists. So it starts very, very early, and then it continues. Then, over time, male readers predominate in genres like science fiction, fantasy, military history. We seem to, I think that collectively we seem to be telling boys that it's all right to just think about yourself and to think about other people like you. And and stay in your little male bubble. But I said it starts very early. The only novels that male readers seem to be willing to read, apart from science fiction, fantasy, thrillers, are classics. So if you look at the audience for War and Peace, it's 50% male, 50% female. But if you look at the audience for Sally Rooney, 80-20, whatever. So there's some male readers seem to think, oh, well, it's been established as a classic. It's been there for a century. Maybe it's worth my time. But as I said, like women keep the business afloat. We don't really know why. We don't really know how to get men to read more. We just talk about it. But it is. These are simply totally well-established facts, country after country.
I mean, I'm aware of this statistic for films because, you know, when there are testosterone-filled films, then you see lots of men flocking to the theaters. But if there's a female-centric character, the film doesn't generally do well. But I wasn't so aware of the statistics for books.
It's the old joke, right? That a couple of years ago, so heterosexual couples, right? That the man is saying, "I will agree to go see Barbie with you if you come watch Oppenheimer with me," whereas the woman is totally willing to go watch both.
So, you know, he had spoken about women perpetuating patriarchy, and that is something that you actually explore in your book, right? So the father, as we said earlier, is the one who wants his daughter to be empowered, but the mother, who actually hasn't seen anything different, wants her daughter to lead the same life that she has led. She wants her to get married quickly and have children. Was that something that you consciously explored? Because I haven't read too many novels which really talk about the internalized patriarchy of women.
I think this is something that is evident across families in my community, where mothers, their biggest worry is, you know, getting their daughters married on time. So it was obvious that, you know, and also this book is set in the 90s, where Duha didn't have the same opportunities that we have today with work from home and, you know, options to do something with herself. So this is something that so this part was at least me depicting reality as I saw it, where definitely most of, you know, patriarchy, it's internalized so much that I don't think they recognize it as patriarchy. They don't really, it's so much of conditioning, you know, so much of conditioning. This is how it was, this is how it will be, this is how it should be, is something that, you know, Duha's mother feels. So, I mean, this is something I see across families even now. So that part came naturally to me. I've always had a slightly contentious mother-daughter relationship in most of my books. You know,
why is that?
So my mother is not here today. You know, sometimes she does come with me, but we don't have that sort of like, you know, dynamic. But there is, I think it's just as a fiction writer, there's something interesting about two women from two different generations trying to understand each other and trying to, most of the time, failing to understand each other. You know, the opportunities the mother didn't have and the opportunities the daughter has for her, you know, to be able to let go of her resentment, not to even acknowledge the resentment in the first place. You know, that is something that I see. I'm not saying this is a direct reflection from my life, but it's some observations I've had. So it just comes naturally to me. So in fact, my first novel also had kite strings, also had a similar contentious relationship between the mother and the daughter. And that, since it was my first novel, everyone thought, you know, my family, I have like a handful of readers in my family. The rest of them are non-readers. So they just assumed I've written everything that happened in our life. So, you know, they were trying to find parallels to people. And that was when I realized, oh my God, I better be careful and, you know, going forward, because I plan to write much more. So, I mean, obviously I couldn't have lived all those lives, and now they've kind of stopped asking me this question. So.
But have they ever said, you know, have you written about us? Is that about us?
No, I think after the first book, they kind of, you know, the first book borrowed a lot from some of my family members, because when you're writing your first book, you know, your craft is not that defined. At least for me, I kind of just wrote what I knew, and it just came out on the page. And afterwards, when I read it, I said, oh my God, this is this aunt, or this is that uncle. And then it was too late. The book was published. And I could only hope they didn't read it, you know. So since they weren't readers, I don't think they read it.
So in your book, of course, patriarchy is a running theme, and you mentioned Kunal. Both Kunal and Rohit, both the brothers in the book, believe that they can act and behave in certain ways with a certain level of authority, sometimes even condescension. And Kunal clearly thinks that because his father has passed away, he immediately has the rights to the family, to everything that belongs to the family, that he should be inheriting the property, and also appoints himself as the head of the family, right? So talk to us a little bit about weaving in that patriarchy, and is that something that you saw around you?
Well, look, my novel is a novel by a South Indian writer about Delhi, and even though it's only really one South Indian character, minor character, it's entirely from the perspective of people who've lived in Delhi most of their lives, if not all their lives. Of course, my take on Delhi is informed by the fact that I grew up somewhere else, and so when I moved to Delhi, I wasn't looking through the eyes of a native. I was looking through the eyes of someone who was not sometimes surprised, but above all just curious. And you would see a family which was outwardly a certain way, and then the better you got to know them, you'd realize that what they're truly like. But in the case of Kunal, though, I should just explain for people who haven't read the book. He has a theory. His theory is not as simple as I'm a man, so I should be head of the family. What happens in his family? So there are very typical is perhaps the wrong word, but we've all heard of families like this, which are people who left Lahore or other parts of Western Punjab in 1947 or 1946 and made this new life for themselves in what we now call South Delhi. Some of these families became fabulously wealthy. This is one such family. And they have a daughter, and then they adopt a son. Now this is by design, my design, because we don't have the father's version or the mother's version. We only have Kunal's version. And Kunal's version is, I was not adopted because my mother couldn't conceive another child. I was adopted because they didn't want to take the chance of having another girl. They wanted to be sure of having a son. They came to the orphanage, they adopted me. And what he says is, well, whereas other people's birth is sort of random and accidental, I am someone who was chosen. I was chosen by this family precisely because I am a boy. Therefore, by logical extension, I am now head of the family, because otherwise, why would they have chosen me? And he has this whole thing about how his father saw him. He claims that his father saw him and said, I knew at once we had this connection as if we were father and son in a past life. And there were 177 boys in the orphanage, but when I saw you, I knew that you were the one. So Kunal believes that he's chosen, but he's also racked with anxiety because his sister is a biological child of the father, and he's not. And so he has this duality of a feeling of entitlement, a feeling of being chosen, but also being anxious about being adopted. And very often, this saying that people learn in business school, where you stand depends on where you sit. And very often our theories about the world, our kind of social and political theories, are just ways of rationalizing and justifying our own material needs or our own material desires. So because he wants to be head of the family, he wants to inherit everything, he's also, come up with this broader theory about how in India, as he puts it, the son is always the boy is always head of the family, and the second the father dies, there's a new head of the family who is the son, just like the second the king dies, there's a new king who's the son. And as I said, he is an advocate of patriarchy, and he is someone who, in the same family, we have a daughter who's totally westernized, and a son who sees himself as a kind of keeper of proper Indian values, which are patriarchal.
So, of course, Delhi is a character in the novel, right? And you lived in Delhi for many years. You just mentioned that you've moved back to Bangalore. One character in the novel actually says, I hate you like I love you, which is a song in an Amir Khan song, actually. Is that your relationship with Delhi as well? Does that reflect your opinions?
Yes. My editor described the novel as a love-hate letter to Delhi. I think now, looking back at the novel, I think the love is not always very evident. I did love living in Delhi, especially initially. There were two aspects of it that ultimately made me find it unlivable. The obvious one is the air pollution, which is very important, and the book deals with it in graphic detail. The other is that Delhi, unfortunately, this has now become the pattern for Indian cities, but it was pioneered in Delhi. Delhi is the most segregated city that one could possibly conceive of. In Bombay, in Calcutta, even in the part of Bangalore where I live, you will actually go one street down or 3 houses down in some cases, and there will be differences of class. You cross borders of class, religion, so on and so forth. The Delhi is structured such that the rich need to never meet anybody. Other than the people who work for them, they never need to meet anyone who's not in their class. Never even need to see them in many cases. And it's also in the last 10 or 20 years really gone that way on religious lines as well, because recent Muslim arrivals to the city are systematically unable to rent homes except in majority Muslim neighborhoods. So I did eventually over time become quite disgusted. There's no other word for it, with these kind of central facts of life in Delhi, and that's reflected in the book. And the narrator of my book, she feels tied to Delhi, but she has aspirations of leaving herself. Interestingly, I'll just end on this. I was a bit worried about how the book would be received in Delhi, but actually, people like to read about themselves. So people who live in Delhi are they're happy to read a novel that's set in Delhi, even if it's one that's quite unflattering in its depiction of the city.
Also, I can't imagine anyone having a problem with someone writing about the air pollution in Delhi. And Andaleeb does play an important role in your books as well. I mean, a lot of them are set in Bangalore, which is where you have spent a good amount of your life, right?
So I've lived all my life in Bangalore until very recently. So, when Keshava was saying he lived a very sheltered life, you said, I don't know, mine was way more sheltered than that. In the sense, I got married at 19 and, I had my kids, and it was such a small bubble that I was living in, where I was expected to be this. No one forced me. I was expected to be the housewife and, mother and all that. And I've always felt like I need to do more. I want to do more, but how?
You're a bit like Duha.
So, no, for me, how do I do this? How do I write about things that I have never seen, never experienced? I've never worked anywhere. How can I write a story about contemporary people when I've never lived that life, So I'm in that 10% of people who, I don't know the percentage, I'm just randomly throwing numbers. But, people who finish school, college, get married, and, and as that person, how do I write about something? So it became important for me to be authentic. And it is very important for me to be authentic. I really would probably die of embarrassment if I wrote something and someone pointed out, this is not how it's supposed to be. You've never seen it. You're a fake. You're a fraud. So for me, I had to write something that was true to me. And so that's why I was writing these stories of women, and I started, I started writing stories of children or, young adults, because I could relate to that angst, because there was a lot of angst in my own life, getting married at 19 and everyone's getting jobs, I'm, changing diapers. So a lot of angst. So all that had to be translated into books. So I just wanted to write what I knew. And obviously, since I've lived all my life in Bangalore, my stories are set in Bangalore. And that was it. That was most of it,
I'm curious, so when you both have ideas and you start a novel, what is the most challenging part of the novel? Is it to bring out the emotional truth of the characters? Is it the case that you have a theme in your head and then you're trying to weave your story around that theme? Or is it setting? What is it? What's the most challenging part?
Setting is a little difficult because all the books can't read the same, especially if I'm setting them all in Bangalore. They can't be the same. They have to be, something has to set them apart. Also, this one I set in the 90s because for the simple reason that it was easier for her father to cheat in the 90s than today. I mean, her mother would have definitely found out if he was cheating on her now. Uh, Also, the way ideas come are so different each time an idea comes. So I kind of hold on to that and start developing from there. Like this, you will not believe where this idea came from. You know, this is story.
Tell us.
So there's a show on Apple TV called Monarch, and it's a science fiction show, and it's about, so this girl visits her father's, it's that whole monsters thing. So this girl visits her father's apartment in Japan and discovers that he has another family there. So she meets her brother, her half-brother, and I was like, oh, but what if they were not siblings, you know? What if she falls in love with him? And there, my mind started working over time and started working on this book. So each idea originates differently. So the way I tackle it is, I don't have a structured way. So I kind of, for me, it's very important to have faith in the process. I used to get frustrated in the beginning when this is not flowing the way I wanted to, but now I've realized that you let it be and it will eventually come along the way it's supposed to.
And what about you?
Well, it's harder for me to speak with authority than Andaleeb because I've only published 2 books. But thus far, I would say there's a kind of sort of, you know, the kind of, if you think of a chess analogy, you know, openings, middle game, end game. Middle game is a bit tricky because the kind of novels I write, they can go in different directions. And then when you read, when I read the first draft, I find that there's a problem in the middle where I know the reader's attention is going to wander, and that's a very, you know, you can cut some things out, but usually you have to actually often have to rewrite many chapters to get that, give that book that form and that continuity. Yeah, that's what I found most difficult.
I think we're running out of time, so I have one last question for both of you, and it's something that I actually started my introduction with, which is that we live in the age of AI, right? I've actually heard some writers say that when they have gotten stuck with their novel, they've just sort of put the idea past ChatGPT. It has thrown up some suggestions as to how the novel has gone. They haven't taken it, but just out of curiosity to know, you know, what ChatGPT might think about it. What do you firstly, have you ever done anything like that? Have you ever asked ChatGPT where your character should go from, you know, where you've been stuck? And what do you think AI has done to creativity and to writing fiction?
Okay, well, sometimes I feel like you are not asking the question the wrong way, but very often I feel we are asking the question the wrong way, because the question really isn't, can AI write fiction? Obviously, it can. Can AI write fiction well? Well, it can write fiction better than 99% of humans. It can do it faster than 100% of humans. The question to me is much more, what does it mean for a human to not be able to write a novel? Because that's really what we're doing, is we're going to lose our ability to read, our ability to write.
As I said in the beginning, to even you know, write a speech.
And again, to come back to chess, I mean, I was thinking about this because I was attending Vishwanath Anand's session. You know, we've known since 1997 that computer can beat humans at chess. And since 1997, the gap has always grown, has only grown. But you know, that hasn't stopped humans from playing chess or trying to be good at it. And of course, they do use AI a lot in their training. I'm not convinced yet that it's helpful for us. I guess I don't really know why I would even want to. I mean, to save myself time, but that seems like a. I don't think my yeah, and I think I'm very afraid of diminishing my own ability to solve that problem. And the chess player has to use AI because she or he is playing against somebody who is going to use AI, and we know that if one is using it and the other isn't, the one who's using it will win. So they have a competitive reason to do it. What we do is not competitive in that way. And I just, you know, I would like to make of my own capacities what I can, and not risk, just not risk.
And that's your gift, and that's your talent. So
I just want to say that I'm very proprietary about my characters, and I don't think AI can know them better than me. You know? I mean, AI can try. I use AI, ChatGPT, for research on a few places, and that also you have to double check because, you know, it makes up stuff on the go. And I write about such niche characters. I'm like, how are you going to know what it's like to live, the Lababi Indian Muslim girl? How can you possibly know anything about, there is no way AI can know, is what I feel. So I haven't tried it, but I use it for research mostly about locations and places, that sort of thing, very sparingly.
Right. I'd love to ask you both more questions, but I think we're running out of time. So I'm going to throw open the floor for questions.
Hi. Hi, Keshava. Hi, Andaleeb. My name is Fatima. It was great to hear you guys talk about both of your novels, and more importantly, so the underlying bigger message that it had to give, or the things that you had to tell the people through your stories. And I myself am somebody who believes that if I ever write a book, I want it to not be something that people just read, but it has to be something that has something to tell the people. And while I appreciate that there is so much political or deeper meanings to the stories that you're writing, and while I myself am an advocate for it, my question is, again, this is very opinion-based, but is it so terrible to write fiction just for the sake of writing something, or just for the sake of fun? Is it even possible to write fiction that does not have that sort of an underlying meaning to it?
My books are not, political in the sense that you would say directly. They are, they are absolutely for fun. I write them to entertain people. And if someone gets a message along the way, then it's well and good. It's never something that I intend specifically. So my books are all for fun. You'll find them outside. I'm openly pushing you to them, but they're definitely, they're meant for enjoyment. And I think even the fact that you mentioned that why can't something be just for fun, that is in itself is also political, So everything is political. So even fun books can be. So I don't know what you have.
No, I completely agree. I think we've had this particular problem in India, which we've now exported to other countries, unfortunately, which is this idea that writers have a moral, political, social obligation. One of my favorite novels, Indian novels of all time, which is Ved In by Nirmal Verma, published, the translation is called Days of Longing. It's a beautifully written love story set in Prague in the 1960s. And he was castigated by his contemporaries. How can you write about love? That's a bourgeois subject. You have to come back to what you said. Literature has to help overcome oppression. No, I think literature's job is not to make the world a better place. It can be to give you a better day by a more enjoyable, stimulating, pleasurable day. And yes, some novels might, propagate certain ideas, others might not. Personally, I always come back to the thing that means most to me is language, the beauty of language, whether in poetry, whether in prose. And, that may not, it might not help end poverty or caste oppression or whatever, but it certainly makes my day better.
Thank you so much.
We have a question here in front.
Hi, I'm Priyam. Thank you both of you for the wonderful session. My question is for Keshava. So you have a father who's had a brilliant literary output and a very different kind of literary output than your fiction writing. But I'm interested in how was it to grow up with a father who's working in the archives, who's writing constantly, and how did that shape your writing, your creative process, your discipline of writing, and where are the places where you take from him, and where are the places that you've departed from him? So.
Yeah, I should say that I have two parents, and this is not a way of dodging a question which I will briefly answer, but. In terms of novel writing, the other parent is a much bigger influence. So both my mother and her family, and her mother, I'd say, are bigger influences, because my mother is a designer, and writing fiction is a creative, imaginative exercise. The more I know about what my father does, the more I'm aware of the differences. The big thing I took from my father is work ethic. Because it's just the daily discipline of he's at his desk every morning before breakfast, and come what may, really. And that kind of routine is, if you see somebody, if you see a parent, it doesn't have to be in writing. You could have a father who's a accountant, as in the book. You could have a father who's an electrician, a doctor, whatever has it. But you see or a mother, whatever, you see your parent with that kind of routine. And although my mother is every bit, if not more, hardworking, she doesn't have that routine. So I think seeing my father as a creature of routine was incredibly helpful. I don't do this very much anymore, but I used to also write about politics. And there, of course, the comparison was more reasonable because we were kind of doing the same thing. But I don't really do that anymore. And doing that made me very aware of how different novel writing is. I think the way I try to do it, I suspect it has more in common with painting or musical composition than it does with writing history books based on archival research.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Tabriz. I would like to thank you guys for the wonderful session. My question is actually to both of you. Like, when you're framing your male and female protagonists, we all know it's a fictional book, and you're writing the book for impressionable young minds. So where do you actually draw the boundary, like how fictional you want your character to be? Because when they read it, they might have that impression of that particular person, like they want their future partner to be such, right? So do you have a boundary where, how fictional I want my character to be? And how do you address that?
At the risk of sounding very arrogant, I don't think about the reader at all, when I'm writing. This is for me, this is my story. For me, it's very important. I write it the way I see it. And I think if there is a problem, I trust my editor to point it out. But apart from that, for me, it's very important I write the story that I have, as I have envisioned it. Because the moment I start thinking, oh, am I doing this? Oh, some impressionable children are watching movies like Animal today. They are watching all kinds of crap. Who's stopping them? So at least, in my mind, I tell myself, okay, it's okay if kids are reading about, if they're reading all these intimate scenes in my book, at least I'm talking about consent. At least it's, done in a way that is tasteful. So I rationalize that in a very small corner of my mind because I don't think about the reader at all, at least when I'm writing. Because writing for me is solely for myself. And then when it goes out, and then I start getting, oh my God, what's going to happen now?
So I don't know about the reader that I think about, but now having published 2 novels, my impression of the reader that I actually have is average age is over 60. So I don't know about impressionable young minds. There may be some of them, but they don't predominate. See, what is like? I always get a little irritated when people say that just talk about novels as a form of storytelling, because as if films and TV and novels are all the same. One of the things that is distinctive about fiction is that every reader reads it at her or his own pace, and at every time the book is read as a collaboration between the writer and the reader. So when you watch a film, you're not constantly pausing to watch. I mean, maybe if you're a film student, but otherwise you're not pausing to watch that scene again. But you're constantly rereading sentences, rereading paragraphs, going back. You've just read something about a character, you'll go back 20 pages to say, oh, did I read that earlier thing wrong the first time? And so I try to have as much space in my books as possible for different readers to come to different conclusions. There will be some readers who really like my narrator. There's some readers who will find her very irritating, very smug, what have you. My first novel was deliberately written with an ending where some readers might conclude that, might have an optimistic idea of what happens to a particular character. Other readers might think, oh no, her life is doomed. I really want to have that space. And we have to, however old the reader is, I want to treat the reader like a grown-up. I don't want to tell them what to think. I want them to write the book each time with me, and I'm very idealistic in that way. I really want the reader to be reading at the highest possible level of intensity and awareness and thoughtfulness.
Okay, that's going to be the last question. We're really running
Thank
out of
you.
time.
Yeah, my question is very simple to both of you. Andaleeb, you've been writing for so long. You've written your second book, Keshava. How has your everyday experiences, or as a writer, has helped you sort of pick up your next idea or write your next book? Because I still believe writing the first book is easier. It just gets difficult to top the previous one you've written. But how do you do it consistently? And how did you get over your first book, which was, if I'm not wrong, it has a little bit of, I've read that, Harry Potter and this whole fandom thing going on, to this Tiger Share, which is completely different. How do you navigate that?
I keep joking that they need to develop that cloning technology fast and clone 3 versions of me to write all the books that I want to write in this lifetime. Because I have so many things constantly popping up, ideas, I have half-written chapters, and I'm like, when is this going to happen? So I don't have that problem.
So as a reader, I've often observed 2 different kinds of novelists. One kind who are sort of writing about themselves book after book. Javier Marias, Philip Roth. I'm talking about writers that I admire here. And other writers who are really never writing about themselves. Hilary Mantel, Kazuo Ishiguro. And the latter category are the ones who tend to reinvent themselves, try to find something new to do with every book. That's sort of what the way, because I'm not writing about myself, that's the direction I like to go in. I found the second book much easier. Well, the first book was easy to write because I didn't know how to write a book for a start. So I didn't know what I didn't know, and I was just kind of fooling around. It gets harder in a way because you're more questioning of yourself, you're more self-conscious. But it gets easier other ways because hopefully you also get better. I'm not going to do it, but I can't tell you, like, if I could go back and rewrite that first book now, it would be completely different. Yeah, so I'm really not happy with a lot of things in that book, with the perspective that I have now of having written a second book and working on a third book and all of that. But as to where ideas come from, as I said to the start, I don't know. That's a mystery.
Okay, on that note, we're going to end this session because we've really run out of time. Sorry to the next panel. Thank you so much, Andaleeb and Keshava, and thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Radhika.